For decades, red meat has been put in the dock. You've probably heard that it clogs arteries, causes cancer, inflames the body, and should be eliminated from your diet as soon as possible. But what if the story isn't quite like that? What if there's a side to the science of red meat that rarely makes headlines? A side that talks about rebuilding, energy, hormonal balance, and brain health. In this video, we're going to do something simple. Follow what the data actually says, without demonizing, without romanticizing, with honesty. You'll discover what happens inside your body when you eat red meat every day for 30 days, week by week, focusing on the benefits this food can provide, the unique nutrients it offers, and also where excess meat starts to take its toll. Before continuing, this content is educational and informative. It does not replace the guidance of a doctor or nutritionist. If you have any specific health condition, always consult a professional before changing your diet. Now let's see what science has to say. What does red meat really contain? Before discussing the effects, you need to understand exactly what goes into your body when you eat red meat. And the list is more impressive than most people imagine. High biological value protein. Red meat contains all the essential amino acids, those that the body cannot produce on its own and needs to obtain through food. This makes it a complete protein with high absorption by the body. Heme iron. This is the type of iron found exclusively in foods of animal origin. It has a much higher absorption rate than the iron found in vegetables, and we'll talk more about that in detail later. Zinc, an essential mineral for the immune system, for tissue healing, and, as you will see, for hormone production. Selenium, an important antioxidant for thyroid function and cell protection. Vitamin B12, one of the most critical nutrients for the functioning of the nervous system and brain, and one that red meat provides in abundance. Natural creatine. Yes, the same creatine that athletes supplement with. Red meat is one of the richest dietary sources of this compound, which is directly linked to muscle energy production and cognitive function. Carnosine, a dipeptide with antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, found in high concentrations in red meat and virtually absent in plant-based foods. Animal fat, including saturated fat and cholesterol, which for decades were seen as enemies, but which science has revisited with a much more careful eye. This combination of nutrients makes red meat one of the most nutritionally dense foods available. Vitamin B12, the nutrient the brain needs. Let's start with vitamin B12, because it deserves special attention. Vitamin B12 is essential for the formation of red blood cells, for maintaining the myelin sheath that coats neurons, and for the proper functioning of DNA. In other words, your brain, your nervous system, and your energy depend directly on it. And here's the point that many people don't know. Vitamin B12 is found in bioavailable form almost exclusively in foods of animal origin. Vegetables do not contain active B12. Algae and some fermented foods may contain analogous forms, but absorption by the human body is limited and debated in the scientific literature. Red meat is one of the most concentrated and bioavailable sources of B12. A serving of beef liver, for example, contains amounts that far exceed the daily recommendation. What happens when B12 levels are adequate? Reasoning becomes sharper. Memory works better. Cellular energy production is more efficient. Mood stabilizes. And the nervous system has what it needs to stay healthy. What happens when the disability sets in? Persistent fatigue, tingling in the extremities, brain fog, mood swings, and in more advanced cases, neurological damage that can be irreversible. Vitamin B12 deficiency is more common than you might think, especially in people who have reduced or eliminated their consumption of animal protein without proper guidance. Eating red meat regularly is one of the most direct ways to maintain optimal B12 levels. Heme iron. Why it's not the same as iron from vegetables. Now let's talk about iron, and about a fundamental difference that is rarely explained clearly. There are two types of dietary iron: heme iron, present in foods of animal origin, and then on-heme iron, present in vegetables such as spinach, lentils, and beans. The difference between them lies in absorption. Heme iron is absorbed by the intestine at a rate that varies between 15% and 35%. Non-heme iron has an absorption rate that can range from 2% to 20%, and this can be further reduced by the presence of other compounds in the meal, such as phytates and oxalates, present in the vegetables themselves. This means that, in practice, the iron you absorb from a serving of red meat is significantly greater than the iron you absorb from an equivalent serving of spinach, even if the numbers on the nutrition facts label look similar. Iron plays a central role in the body. It is a component of hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen through the blood. When iron levels are low, oxygen reaches the tissues less efficiently, resulting in fatigue, shortness of breath, difficulty concentrating, and decreased physical and mental performance. Iron deficiency anemia is one of the most prevalent nutritional conditions in the world. And red meat, because it provides heme iron in large quantities and with high absorption, is one of the most effective foods for preventing and correcting this deficiency, always with professional guidance. Hormones. This is probably the most underrated topic in the conversation about red meat. There is a direct connection between the consumption of animal protein and hormone production. And it involves 3 nutrients that red meat provides in abundance: zinc, cholesterol, and saturated fat. Let's take it one step at a time. Zinc is an indispensable cofactor for testosterone production. Studies published in journals such as Nutrition Studies show that men with zinc deficiency have lower testosterone levels, and that supplementation or increased dietary intake of this mineral can raise hormone levels back to normal. Cholesterol is the precursor molecule for all steroid hormones, including testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and cortisol. The body needs cholesterol to manufacture these hormones. Diets that are extremely low in animal fat can compromise this production. Saturated fat, for decades viewed as a villain, has been re-examined by science with surprising results. More recently reviewed studies, including meta-analyses published in American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, they found no direct and conclusive association between saturated fat consumption from whole foods and increased cardiovascular risk when the overall dietary context is healthy. Moreover, very low-fat diets are associated with hormonal imbalances in both men and women. Animal fat provides the building blocks that the endocrine system needs to function. This doesn't mean eating fat without limit. It means understanding that animal fat, consumed within a balanced dietary context, is not the enemy it has been portrayed as for decades. Animal fat and health, what science has revisited. Let's delve a little deeper into this point because it deserves attention. The hypothesis that saturated fat causes cardiovascular disease has dominated medicine and nutrition for decades. It originated in the 1950s with the studies of researcher Ansel Keys and has influenced dietary guidelines worldwide. But in recent decades, this hypothesis has been seriously questioned within the scientific community itself. Systematic reviews and meta-analyses published in high-impact journals, including British Medical Journal and the Annals of Internal Medicine. They reviewed data from hundreds of thousands of participants and concluded that the evidence to condemn saturated fat from whole foods like meat is weaker than previously assumed. What seems to matter most is the complete dietary context, not a single isolated nutrient. Animal fat provides fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K2, which depend on fat to be absorbed by the body. Vitamin D is essential for immunity and bone health. Vitamin K2 is associated with cardiovascular health and bone density. Vitamin A of animal origin has a much higher bioavailability than plant-based beta-carotene. Furthermore, animal fat contributes to satiety. Meals with adequate fat content prolong the feeling of fullness, reduce insulin spikes, and can help control appetite throughout the day. This is not an unrestricted defense of unlimited fat consumption. Now let's look at what happens week by week when you eat red meat every day for 30 days, starting with what the body experiences when it receives these nutrients consistently. Week 1. In the first few days, digestion may require a little more effort, especially if you weren't used to consuming animal protein in large quantities. The stomach needs to produce more hydrochloric acid to break down the proteins. This is normal and tends to adjust. For those who engage in physical activity, the first benefits appear quickly: faster muscle recovery, especially due to the natural creatine and complete protein, more energetic workouts, less post-exercise muscle soreness, satiety increases. Animal protein has a strong satiating effect, which can naturally reduce the urge to snack between meals and stabilize energy levels throughout the day. Week 2. As iron and B12 levels begin to stabilize, many people report an improvement in their overall mood. The mental fog that accompanies a deficiency in these nutrients begins to dissipate. Mood can become more stable. This is related to both B12, which participates in the synthesis of neurotransmitters, and zinc, which has a documented role in mood regulation and stress response. For those with low iron levels, the increase in hemoglobin production begins to improve oxygen transport, and the result is more physical and mental energy. If this content resonates with you, follow the channel now. Every week there's a new video explaining what happens to your body based on what science actually says without exaggeration or fads. Click follow so you don't miss any. In the 3rd and 4th weeks, the effects go beyond subjective perception and begin to appear in more concrete markers. Serum iron and ferritin. For those with low iron stores, weeks 3 and 4 of consistent heme iron consumption begin to replenish ferritin stores, the storage form of iron. This is particularly relevant for women of childbearing age who lose iron monthly and have a higher risk of deficiency. Vitamin B12. Serum B12 levels respond to consistent dietary intake. For those with below ideal levels, 4 weeks of regular consumption can already show measurable improvement. Testosterone and hormonal markers. Studies with men who increased their consumption of animal protein and zinc document an increase in free testosterone levels, especially when previous consumption was below the required level. Muscle mass and body composition. With complete protein and natural creatine arriving daily, the body has the building blocks to preserve and build muscle mass, especially when combined with physical exercise. What science makes clear is that these benefits appear more consistently when consumption is of fresh, quality meat, unprocessed, and when it is part of a dietary context that also includes vegetables, fiber, and other food groups. This video would be dishonest if it didn't talk about the other side. Excessive and unbalanced consumption of red meat has documented associations that deserve attention. Processed meat is different from fresh meat. This point is crucial and often ignored in studies that condemn red meat. Bacon, sausage, salami, ham, and processed meats in general contain nitrates, nitrites, high sodium levels, and other additives that have far more consistent associations with health risks than fresh, unprocessed meat. The method of preparation matters. Grilling meat at high temperatures for extended periods can lead to the formation of compounds called heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, substances that studies associate with a potentially increased risk. Cooking at lower temperatures, sautéing, or steaming significantly reduces the formation of these compounds. Quantity makes all the difference. Consuming a moderate portion of quality red meat is different from eating large quantities every day without variety. An excess of any nutrient, including iron and protein, can overload organs such as the liver and kidneys over time. The complete dietary context is what matters most. Red meat in a diet rich in vegetables, fiber, and varied foods has a very different impact than the same meat in a diet low in fiber, high in ultra-processed foods, and with a sedentary lifestyle. The honest message is this: fresh red meat, in moderate quantities, properly prepared and as part of a varied diet, has a nutritional profile that science does not justify demonizing. So, is eating red meat every day good or bad for you? This is the question everyone wants to answer with a yes or a no. But science rarely works that way, and anyone who gives you an absolute answer is oversimplifying a complex issue. Based on the available literature, the data suggests the following. Fresh, unprocessed red meat is a nutritionally dense food. It provides nutrients that are difficult to obtain in equivalent quantity and quality from plant sources, especially B12, heme iron, zinc, and complete protein. Animal fat is not the villain it has been portrayed to be. Recent science has revised the relationship between saturated fat from whole foods and cardiovascular risk, and the evidence is less conclusive than had been assumed for decades. Quality trumps quantity. A serving of fresh, well-prepared meat, included in a varied diet rich in vegetables, is very different from large portions of processed meat consumed daily without balance. Eating red meat every day isn't the same for everyone. Level of physical activity, digestive health, genetics, other eating habits, all of these influence how the body responds. What the 30 days show, for most people who consume quality red meat in adequate quantities, is a consistent supply of essential nutrients that the body uses for energy, hormones, the nervous system, and body composition. It's not a magic solution. It's not an absolute risk. It's a food with real benefits and real limitations that deserves to be viewed with more balance than the dominant narrative has allowed in recent decades. If you want to better understand how red meat consumption fits into your specific reality, seeking guidance from a nutritionist is the smartest approach. Every body is different. Every context is unique. You've made it this far, and that means you really take your health seriously. Red meat contains a set of nutrients that few foods can offer with the same bioavailability: B12, heme iron, zinc, creatine, carnosine, and fats that serve as building blocks for hormones. Vitamin B12 is essential for the brain and nervous system, and red meat is one of the most efficient sources available. Heme iron is absorbed by the intestine much more efficiently than plant-based iron, and plays a central role in energy production, oxygen transport, and cognitive function. Animal fat has been revisited by science, and the evidence to condemn it outright is weaker than decades of headlines have made it seem. Excessive consumption, processed meat, and improper preparation pose real risks, and these need to be considered. And the complete dietary context is always what matters most. If this video changed the way you see red meat, or at least made you question what you'd been hearing, subscribe to the channel now. Every week there's a new video showing what happens to your body, based on what science actually says, without fads or exaggeration. Click subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me in the comments, do you eat red meat every day? How do you feel? Until the next video.